All right, we're back, and I changed my mind. Instead of adding our next drawing to the one that we already had a couple of objects on, I'd like you to start with a fresh piece of paper. So go ahead and draw your central vanishing point on your horizon line. Make sure that horizon line runs right through the middle of your paper. We probably will be doing the next drawing by flipping the paper over and working on the other side of it, so it'll just give you a little bit more space to work. Once you get your central vanishing point in, we're going to be drawing steps, and we're going to be drawing the steps as if we're seeing them from the side. That's a little bit easier way to do this in one-point perspective without confusing things. As we get into two-point perspective, we'll be drawing steps that are actually going back away from us on the part that we're dividing. So you'll see that gets a little bit more complicated, and we'll have to use the X to do that effectively. But for now, we're just going to kind of give you the basics of how you might construct the steps so that when we get into the more complex process, it won't seem quite so foreign. So I'm going to shift the drawing a little bit over so that you have more room to view, but realize that we're still going to try to keep our drawing pretty close to our central vanishing point. Don't put it too far away or you'll see a lot more distortion. And the first step is to figure out where you want the basic steps to be. So we're going to make our steps kind of zigzag up away from the central vanishing point. And because this part of the steps is not foreshortened, it's not moving away from us into space, we can just use our ruler to measure this out. So with real steps, usually the steps are about twice as long as they are high. So rather than making them sort of 1 inch tall, 1 inch wide, 1 inch tall, if you would make it twice as wide as it is tall, they'll feel more believable. And when we're doing interiors later, that will make it seem more like a real set of steps. So let's go ahead and make a rectangle. We're going to just do 3 steps on ours. So why don't you choose a measurement that's easily divided by 3. So you could make it 3 centimeters or 6 centimeters tall, and then make it twice as wide as you make it tall. So I'm going to go ahead and use 6 as my guideline, and we're going to put the whole box to the left of the central vanishing point so that we can see the front of the steps too. So why don't you go about 2 inches over from your central vanishing point, and maybe let's keep it maybe 2 to 3 inches to the right of the central vanishing point, and then go ahead and choose a height that you can divide by 3. So I'm going to do 6 centimeters, and you might as well go ahead and mark off those thirds as you're doing the measuring here. So you can draw your vertical in as well. So that's 3 inches tall, and then I'm going to extend it across a little bit further. So I'm going to make it 12 centimeters wide. Let me bring this back some. That's what we're doing here. We keep the central vanishing point where you can see it, but all right, so we need 12 wide, and do your best again to keep these truly horizontal. All right, we need 12 centimeters now. And we'll take a vertical line straight up from there to kind of finish off our box. And then along this side too, I'd like you to measure off those same divisions that you had on this other side so that we can draw that across. So we're just doing a process of making a grid that has the same number of rows as it has columns. That's a little bit off. The more accurate you can be on this, the better your steps will end up looking. That one ended up tracing a little bit too low, I think. So let me try it one more time. That looks a little bit better. So you're going to have 3 rows and you're going to have 3 columns. And you can measure the distance across this way if you want to and divide it, that's fine. But a quicker way to do it, which always works in perspective, is to just draw a diagonal. So this is a shortcut, and wherever this diagonal crosses the horizontal lines, if you put a dot there, you can draw a vertical through each one of those points, and then you'll have the same number of rows that you have columns. It always works. So if you had like a weird number like 13 different levels here, if you did a diagonal, you'd end up with 13 intersection points. It would always give you the same number of vertical divisions as you have horizontal divisions. So through each one of these points, you're going to draw a vertical line. Try to keep them as truly vertical as you can. Use your grid underneath your paper, or use one of the tools that we talked about in the other videos to try to keep that nice and square. Okay, now the next step is to darken in the actual contours of the steps. So we're going to erase parts we don't need, but let's go ahead. You can maybe even just freehand do this or trace it with your ruler a little bit darker so that you're really thinking about where those actual steps are. And we're going to erase these extra lines that we don't need. So this part you can just lighten up so that you're not distracted by it. You can start to see the steps a little bit more clearly. Now from each one of these points where these steps change direction, I want you to draw a line to your central vanishing point. So you're going to start here, draw a line, then draw a line from here, draw a line from here, draw a line from here, 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 here. So even though we only have 3 steps, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different points that you're going to be aiming towards your vanishing point. So go ahead and draw those in. At this point we don't know how far back we're going to be extending those, but if you just kind of keep your finger here and pivot, make sure it doesn't shift off of that vanishing point. That's kind of a quick way to get those foreshortened lines drawn in. You should notice that as the steps get closer and closer to your eye level, we're seeing less and less of the top surface of the steps. The further from our eye level they are, the more of that surface we'll see. If we made these so big that they crossed over our eye level, we would not see any of the part that you would actually step on. All we'd be able to see was the riser. So now, either starting at the top or starting at the bottom, we're going to be alternating the same pattern of lines that we used when we did this contour. So if we start at the bottom, we're going to, from this vanishing line, you're just going to pick a point. Let's say we want our steps to be about, again, you can make it pretty much anywhere along here, but once you choose one point, then you use that to help you figure out where all the other ones are going to be. So you're going to follow the same pattern. Here we had a vertical line, so here we're going to add a vertical line. When we hit the next angle change, then we alternate to whatever's happening here. So we'll go vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, and each time you hit one of these plane changes, that's an indication that you need to change from a vertical line to a horizontal and back again. So I'm going to just start at the bottom. You could start at the top if you want, and if you start here, then you'd be starting with the horizontal because that's what's happening first on the front plane of the steps. If you accidentally miss one of these lines, your steps are not going to work out, so make sure you've got a line from every single one of these points along the way. This is another spot where it's pretty important that you really keep your lines truly vertical and truly horizontal. So if you have a triangle or if you have a T-square, go ahead and use it for this so that your steps will work out. So at this point, we've hit a plane change. So whatever happened on the front of the steps, we do the same thing on the back of the steps until we hit the next line. Here we hit the next line, so we switch again. Whatever happens on the front, we're doing the same thing on the back side. So we just like using the horizon line to help me keep this square. We hit another point here, so we've hit that plane change, so now we switch back to horizontal, and we do the same thing on the back there. Then back to a vertical line. when we get to this next plane change. And then at this point, we're back to the horizontal surface. So whatever happens on the front edge of the steps, you should be following the same pattern on the back edge. And if you want to add a little bit of hatching to help show the vertical planes as alternating lights and darks, that kind of helps suggest those steps. You could also darken in all the visible lines now and lighten up any lines that are confusing things or that don't seem to be part of the actual steps. I do hope you'll leave a little ghost image of your measuring line so I can really see that those lines are leading toward your vanishing point. And you do have to draw that vanishing point in for me so that I can check all those angles. If we did it right, we should be able to pivot, and each edge of the steps ends up leading directly to that vanishing point. I'm going to erase these lines since they aren't necessary anymore. And I'm going to erase or lighten these other lines that I use to construct the part of the steps that are moving away from us. So there's our steps in one-point perspective drawn from the side. We can show you later how to draw them as if they're moving away from us, as if we're seeing them from the front, but this is the simpler version to do, so that's a good spot to stop.